Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. As Oklahoma farmers get seed in the ground, we are starting our show today talking about varieties. It is decision time for 4 potential new varieties that have been in the works for years. SUNUP's Dave Deacon got to sit in on one step in the approval process.
It actually started out as 6. The university has a certain procedure that's been in place for as long as I've been here, and that is a cross-DASNR selection of scientists and in some cases administrators. 13625 come together and form this committee to corroborate what's been proposed. The 13209 I kind of see as providing value by decreasing inputs. And it's pretty typical, I think, across land-grant universities that have a university committee like this. But it's the first hurdle that has to be crossed before something can actually be released. Well, those are the 4 experimentals, and it's going to be kind of hard to keep up with these. I realize that the first 2 numbers after the OK indicate when we started testing. The 13621 more in the Panhandle, but also fits north central Oklahoma. It's the pros that outweigh some of those cons that that get us to this place today. But no variety comes forward that doesn't have some weakness to it.
209 with that disease resistance, I was wondering about it in eastern Kansas.
Yeah, but it hasn't yielded, top tier.
Gotcha.
We have committee approval today, but we have to have institutional, that is OAES, Oklahoma Agricultural Experiment Station approval that comes from the director of that station, and that is Dr. Keith Owens. And then once that happens, it's a matter of getting the seed out. We're trying to beat this one with the stuff we're talking about for the next 2 or 3 years, and it's just been tough to beat. It's a showdown kind of week. But we'll go through a year of ramping up seed production. The amount of seed we have for any of these 4 would not be enough to let them fly alone. They need some help.
Well, if there's no other comments or questions for Dr. Carver, we'll ask him to leave the room for a little bit while we have our deliberations. And Brett, if you don't mind, just wait up front.
We're here with Oklahoma State University wheat breeder Brett Carver. Brett, the committee just met and approved 4 new wheat varieties. Tell us about them.
Yes, it was a glorious moment, I'll tell you, because it's a long time coming to get to this point. 4 is a lot, but we can go into just why there were 4. The Plant Materials Release Committee is the name of the committee that meets and approves, goes through the formal process of approving any variety release, wheat or anything else.
And normally you would do this a little bit earlier in the year. Tell us why it kind of took longer this time.
Yeah, it is a little bit late in the process to be doing this. Normally we would like to do it in February, about the time the Oklahoma Crop Improvement Association is meeting, but we just need a little bit more time. There are so many to think about. There are more that we're not going to talk about, that were not released. So we had to kind of go through that decision-making process, and we just took it to the bitter end. And here we are at the end, and now it's time to go.
Well, let's roll them out. Let's talk about the first one. It's called Showdown. So tell us about the properties associated with this variety and kind of the motivation for the name.
Yeah, if I can, let me just kind of set up the whole setup for, because the number is a little bit staggering to me. We've never done this before. And right now you think, gosh, there's so many wheat varieties out there anyway, why 4? And I almost look at it like an arms race. This is an arms race of wheat varieties being distributed and disseminated by a lot of different parties, public and private. And everybody thinks their variety is special. I can see that. But I think we're kind of past that point of saying our variety is special. We want to see our varieties do something special. And that's what each one of these 4 will do. They do something special that the other ones do not do. So with that kind of setup, the Showdown is more of the, down the middle of the road, good, broad utility, hard-red winter wheat variety that's going to go in a lot of places. That's what it does special. We don't have a variety usually that can be adopted and grown successfully in a wide geography. Now, Bentley was one example of that, and Lone Rider is going to be another, but we just haven't had very many of them. Showdown is one.
Okay, what's the next one?
How about Green Hammer? By the suggestion of the name, this is a good green wheat variety in the face of stress. And the stress is usually going to be leaf rust or stripe rust. With those two very common diseases in Oklahoma, this variety has shown a very green canopy. In other words, a high level of resistance to both diseases. It's very important for our wheat producers in Oklahoma to have that. Unfortunately, we don't have that combination very commonly, but we do in Green Hammer.
Let's talk about Baker's Ann, and that name is sort of special, kind of named after our beloved first cowgirl.
Exactly. You know, it's about time we have something that we can honor the First Lady of Oklahoma State University, and we've had some suggestions to do that, and we wanted to have the right variety to put with that name and the right name to go with it too. So here we're talking about something with the name Baker's in it, something that's not that any of our varieties are going to have trouble in baking quality. They're all very good. But this one is a standout, a very high quality premium baking variety that I think is going to get some attention well beyond the field into the mill. That's what I hope and that's what I expect. So, you know, with our first lady and first class lady and first class wheat variety, I think those two just go hand in hand, Baker's Ann.
And last but not least, true Oklahoma variety Skydance?
That's right. You know, it came from Oklahoma with the name Skydance, and that's what we wanted to communicate, because the variety is already being used outside of the state as a high quality flour for artisan baking. And we know in addition to that artisan baking capability, it has tortilla properties that are unusually good to combine that bread making and tortilla combined baking characters into one variety. That's been a real challenge up until now. Skydance can do both and can possibly go into some of the organic acres that might be picking up in the future. We think it has some potential there.
Now it takes, as you mentioned, years of work, years of science, and lots of strategy to get to this release point.
It really does. The first cross that was made for any of these varieties, for Showdown specifically, was 2005. And so, you know, you've got to go through a long process of inbreeding and doing all this work that really nobody sees. You know, it's nothing that you see in a wheat variety trial. And then by the time you get to the wheat variety trials, it's already been in the program for a decade. And these have been in the program that long, but we still needed more time in those trials to figure out just where they're going to fit best.
So what's next?
That's part of what's next then is still continuing to identify the best area of adaptation. We haven't mapped out right now, but it's a little tentative, and with more time and trials, all four of those varieties together in the same trial, which we haven't really done in the wheat variety trials, that is, we're going to be able to nail that area of adaptation down a little bit better. And they're all different. They're all different.
Well, congratulations to you and the entire wheat improvement team on this very important milestone, and keep us posted.
Sure will. Thank you very much.
Wes Lee with your weekly Mesonet weather report. The majority of the state has experienced some heavy rainfall events during the months of August and early September. The aftermath of these rain events was to leave behind some impressive humidity levels. On this chart, we see the long-term average relative humidity levels for August and September in the purple area. The red line shows the relative humidity levels for the state in 2018. They have been running about 15% higher than normal recently. After experiencing a cooler than normal August, the slightly warmer than normal temperatures reached earlier this week came as a shock. These temperatures, coupled with the high relative humidity, have given us a very uncomfortable heat index. On Tuesday, September the 18th, we had a heat index levels top out in the high 90s and low 100s. The highest number for the day was Valiant that reached 105 degrees Fahrenheit. True autumn-like conditions will be arriving soon. For those gardeners out there, now is the time to finish planting cool season crops such as garlic, spinach, and fescue. It will not be long now until we start seeing freezing temperatures. This map shows the average first freeze date for the different parts of the state. The Panhandle usually gets its first freeze around the middle of October, while the rest of the state is usually the end of October or early November. Now here's Gary talking about the lack of recent rains in the southeast.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, right when we think we're out of trouble with the dry weather, it stops raining for a couple of weeks, it gets hot again, and we're right back in it. Let's take a look at the latest drought monitor report and see where we're at. The trouble we're in this week is that area in yellow across southeast Oklahoma where they become pretty dry over the last 30 to 45 days. Now we still have those core areas of drought in southwest Oklahoma and also some severe drought up in northeast Oklahoma centered on Osage and Washington counties. But that southeastern area is where we're looking at drought starting to develop. They've been dry since really going back to mid-August. If we take a look at the 30-day rainfall map, now this is from August 20th through September 18th, the rainfall from the Oklahoma Mesonet, we can see much of southeast Oklahoma, less than an inch of rainfall, and Worcester in LaFleur County, they've had barely any rainfall at all. In fact, it registers 0.0 on the map. Now, there are other dry areas, of course, across western Oklahoma, down into south central Oklahoma, scattered areas of dryness. This shows up much better on the percent of normal rainfall map from the Oklahoma Mesonet for the same time frame. But again, the large area of reds and oranges across southeast Oklahoma, up into east central Oklahoma, those are the areas we're worried about. And those are the areas that are now in abnormally dry conditions for the most part, which can signal either areas coming into drought or out of drought. We do see the possibility of a cool down starting next week, and we do see a bulge of increased probabilities of below normal temperatures extending down into the southern plains from the northern plains. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Wheat's going in the ground across Oklahoma, and actually it's starting to emerge in parts of the state. Brian, what are some of the things that producers can be doing to help benefit the crop?
So right now you got a couple things to be paying attention to. One is your just nitrogen fertility. Two is your phosphorus and potassium, primarily our macronutrients, NPK, and all others. Hopefully you've gotten an opportunity to get out and get a soil sample and you're taking care of any of those nutrient deficiencies that the soil sample shows. If not, and you're running in just a standard protocol procedure, I still like to look at putting a starter down with the wheat. A little bit of starter is going to benefit in some of the areas that will have low phosphorus because the average is right at okay. Same thing with pH. If your pH is in that 5.6 to 6.0 on the composite sample, I would still go put in a starter because more than likely there's going to be areas of the field that are low. Caution though, we can only put so much fertilizer with the seed when we put it down. Fertilizer has a salt to it, so we don't want to get over those limits. We have some fact sheets and apps that walk you through, depending on row spacing and source, how much you can put with seed. One source we would like to avoid is urea, especially in a dry soil that's sandy. Urea will release ammonia gas as it dissolves and turns from urea into ammonia, and that can harm the seed.
Say a producer didn't do the starter route with that. Talk about some of the options throughout the growth cycle of the wheat plant. What can they do then?
So if you weren't able to get starter down and you really have a deficiency out there, a phosphorus deficiency, there's still an opportunity really quickly to get over the top of it with 184060, so DAP diammonium phosphate or mono ammonium phosphate 1152, and get it on. That phosphorus will still dissolve and get near the root surfaces, but let's make that fast if we're worried about phosphorus. On the nitrogen side, what we have to look at this year, we're starting the year with great moisture. We've started the last couple of years with great moisture. So where do you want your bank to sit? The decisions on nitrogen management right now is, do I want to bank early that we're going to have moisture all through the season and front load up and hope that I either have moisture to reach a yield or not have so much moisture I lose, which is fine. Just know your yield goal. The efficiencies on front loading nitrogen is poorer than running in season. If you're going to say take a little more cautious approach and not put everything up front, highly recommend the enriched strips. Have them out there so if the weather does go well, you know when that crop's responsive. We have the data, we have the research that shows that irregardless of when it shows up, whether it's November, December, January, February, even March, we can recover and reach full yield. And the later you wait for that nitrogen to be applied, getting it into February or March, the more yield you're going to get per pound of nitrogen and more than likely the better quality.
So just real briefly, without the orange coat on, give us just a brief lesson of what nitrogen does for the plant, what phosphorus and all of that. Just real briefly, what do they do?
So nitrogen is your basic building block of DNA, amino acids. It's a major component of chlorophyll. So without nitrogen, you have yellow stunted plants, you don't have chlorophyll activity, and it's small. Phosphorus, it's our powerhouse. ATP, it helps move energy around in the plant. Without phosphorus, we're going to have stunted plants with a purple look. Potassium is important in cell function and in model opening and closing, so it's a great regulator for drought and water moisture in and out. K is going to have a little bit of a stunted plant, and you're also going to have yellowing on the tips, all old growth for N, P, and K.
So if producers have questions about those, there are apps, there are fact sheets, but also they can visit with their county extension office.
Absolutely, county extension office has great resources to go in, learn about managing soil fertility, your different options, your methods, your rates.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. And for more information on any of those, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Oklahoma cow-calf producers that have spring calving operations have bred some replacement heifers last spring, and so we've got those bred replacement heifers going through a good summer, obviously in many cases with adequate forage to where they're gaining a proper amount during the course of summer. But we must keep them gaining as they go through the fall and winter months so that they're in that target body condition of about a 6 at the time that they calve next January or February. That means that these heifers must continue to grow at the rate of at least 1 pound per head per day, assuming they're in good body condition as they come out of the summer months. If those heifers are grazing, say, Bermuda grass or native pastures, one of the warm seasons, as the quality of that grass deteriorates here in the late summer, early fall months, we would expect to need to get some additional protein into those heifers. Usually it'll take about 2 pounds of a high protein supplement, something that's 38 to 44% crude protein, will do the job to keep those heifers growing through the fall months. Now once winter comes and we have the stress of cold weather, as well as in some cases some snow or ice on the ground, then we'll have to shift over and give those heifers a higher energy supplement, perhaps a 20% range cube, and this will probably mean 4 or 5 pounds per head per day to keep those heifers growing at that rate of 1 pound per head per day. Some of you may have wheat pasture available for a supplement for these bred replacement heifers. I think it can be used, but it must be used judiciously. We here at Oklahoma State University have looked at growing bred replacement heifers using wheat pasture and have found that if we leave them on the wheat pasture full time, they'll gain over 3 pounds a head per day, get very, very fleshy, and by the time calving season rolls around, they're a little too fat, and it just increases calving difficulty. But the way to use wheat pasture is to alternate days that the heifers have a chance to graze that wheat pasture. As a maximum, I would say to put them on wheat pasture one day and off on a dry pasture, Bermuda grass or native grass, on the alternate days. We want to remember it is very important that these replacement heifers be in that body condition score of about a 6. In other words, heifers that just look bloomy to us, have good body conditions so that they will raise a healthy calf, they'll be a reproductively sound cow that stays in sync with the rest of the cow herd, and therefore have a chance to give you a profitable cow in the future to help out in the long run. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
It's that time of year again, a little housekeeping for unwanted pesticides that you may not know what to do with. Here's an opportunity for safe disposal.
Some pesticides can become unusable. They're all different. There's not really an expiration date, but over time they will degrade. Some will not become mixable, so definitely they can become unusable or, quote, go bad on some extent. Definitely don't want to go out and pour them by the fence post. As everything else, we're a lot more environmentally conscious. They need to be disposed of properly. So luckily now we have this unwanted pesticide disposal program to make sure they go to the right place. The Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry, or ODAF as we like to call them shorthand, was able about going on 12 years ago to get a fee on registered pesticides that goes in and funds this disposal program, and that will take care of any unwanted, unusable, old pesticides and dispose of that properly through a hazardous waste company and make sure they go the right way, and we keep them out of the ditches and the fence posts and that kind of thing. Nobody wants to harm whether it's their land, whether it's soil, water, those kind of things, and improperly dispose of these products can cause, especially some of the very old products, that could cause a major concern versus, even the new ones we want to make sure they're disposed of properly. We'll be holding the next event, will be September 26th in Woodward at the Woodward County Fairgrounds. We'll run the event from 8 o'clock to 1 o'clock. You show up, bring it, drop it off, and there's no cost. There is a limit up to 2,000 pounds. It's free if it's up to 2,000 pounds, so that's very important to make sure you stay within that limit. You'll show up, drop that. The hazardous waste company will pack that up, and they'll pack it away and send it off properly to take care of. Everything from a little homeowner size up to the large farm shuttles and those kind of things are eligible to come as long as they're pesticides.
There wasn't much action in the grain markets this week. And Kim, so what should producers be aware of?
Well, I think they've got to be aware of what's going on in the corn and soybean harvest, and of course their prices. The Black Sea region continues to be in the news relative to both wheat and corn. And then you've got the Argentina and Australia wheat crops those harvests will start in the near future.
So let's start with corn and beans. How's harvest progressing?
Well, if you look at the U.S. harvest for corn, it's probably right around 10%. I think it came in at 9% on the 16th report, so it's probably above 10 right now. The soybeans came in at 6% harvested, so they're probably up around 10 now. So what the story is on them is we're just getting started.
So have corn and bean prices bottomed out?
I think from looking at the patterns on the prices and reading what's going on in the market, and with corn yields, they're coming in just slightly less than expected, and the general talk is that USDA may have those yields too high. It looks like we may be on the bottoms. They hammered them down pretty hard. They're at new lows. They both established new lows this week and then recovered off of that. So the general consensus is that we're at or near the bottom of the corn and bean prices.
As always, there's continued talks with the Russian wheat production and exports. So tell us what's going on in the Black Sea region.
Well, there's just a lot of uncertainty about Russian wheat production. You look at the WASDE, they raised it up about 100 million bushels this last report. There's questions about the quality of the Russian wheat. We know that there was some sprout damage in some areas, and that's going to lower your milling quality. There's also talk that the Ukrainian wheat production may be slightly higher than we expected. You got Russia, their exports are projected to be down 236 million bushels this year. Now that's good news for the U.S. The Ukraine could take up some of that, but right now the Ukraine prediction is for a decline of 50 million bushels in exports. So there's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of uncertainty coming out of that market, and that's causing our prices to be more volatile.
So all in all, have wheat prices bottomed out, do you think?
I hope they have. We took about $1.10 off the wheat price. We've recovered about 25 cents of that. It appears to me that they've stabilized. A lot's going to depend on the exports out of that Russian market. Is Russia going to put a limit on their exports? And if they do, then our prices are going up. And then you've got the Australian and the Argentine crops coming up. Australia will start harvesting the middle of October, and Argentina in the middle of November. Argentine's crops probably coming in about average. Australia's is well below average.
All righty, thanks, Kim. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist at Oklahoma State University.
As we enter late summer and early fall, people often encounter sick deer, especially deer hanging out around water sources like creeks and ponds. This is often a symptom of a group of viruses called blue tongue, or more specifically, hemorrhagic diseases. And there's several viruses that have very similar symptoms that are hard to distinguish. They affect deer in the late summer and early fall because they're transmitted by biting midges, small flies such as no-see-ums. And these insects reach their highest numbers in late summer. And so typically when a deer becomes infected with these diseases, they'll become lethargic, feverish, they'll urinate a lot, so they'll hang out around water. They will often have swollen tongue or head. They might have ulcers that you might be able to see, especially on the tongue. And the animals they act like they don't feel very well. So if you encounter deer this time of year, you should suspect that it's one of these viruses. While the deer often will die from the disease, but not always, it's not a risk to humans. These diseases cannot be transmitted to people. They can be transmitted to cattle, although typically cows aren't as at risk, depending on which virus it is. But if you suspect that your livestock may be infected by one of these viruses, you can contact your vet for specific information. But while it's not typically a significant disease in cattle and it's not a risk to humans, it can cause pretty significant reductions in deer populations, sometimes as much as 25% in a local area, and it may take a few years for that deer herd to bounce back. There's really nothing you can do about the disease except report it, so contact the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation if you find dead or dying animals.
That'll do it for us this week. A reminder, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.